It's so good to be here. So, usually when people do speeches, they start out with their story to give a backstory. And my story is a bit interesting. I'm a vegan activist today, and I would have never imagined it growing up. When I was younger, my family tree was riddled with cancer. And it always lingered in the back of my mind that I should take health seriously and I should look at a preventative lifestyle and a lifestyle that can be conducive to wellness and reversing diseases such as cancer. I lost an uncle to cancer while I was growing up. I never met my grandfather, and there are many other family members that suffered because of cancer. When I was 17, I found a lump in my throat. And it scared the shit out of me. So I went to the doctors and they told me that it was a benign tumor, so it wasn't cancer. But they said that the probability of it becoming cancer was high, so I had a decision to make. And they offered me surgery or chemotherapy when it does become cancer. So I went for the surgery out of fear, and my parents didn't know better, nobody around me knew better, and I don't blame them for it. So as I was entering the surgery, the doctor said to me that the probability of me losing my voice because of the surgery was high. And they didn't tell me this beforehand. I was entering the theater as they told me. So it's not like I had a choice to back out. So I went ahead with it, thinking I was going to wake up with no voice. When I woke up, my mother was next to me and she said something to me and I replied, and as soon as any voice came out of my mouth, she cried because she thought I might lose my voice too. Ever since then, I had a deep knowingness that I should use my voice. And for a long time, I used it in music. I was a hip-hop artist. I wrote and performed hip-hop tracks, and for about 8 years, I took it really seriously and I was pursuing a career in hip-hop. But I started to not really feel that direction in my life and I wasn't really compelled to continue. And along that journey, I started to go within and I wanted to just become healthier and find a deeper sense of myself. And because of that little push, I ended up becoming a nutrition nerd. I studied nutrition every waking minute. I wanted to understand health at the deepest level. And it led me to doing half a degree in naturopathy. And I got my certificate in plant-based nutrition through eCornell and the T. Colin Campbell Foundation. Through all of that, I became a raw vegan. And I was raw vegan for 2 years. And I felt amazing. I felt like I was on top of the world. I felt like I was taking control of my life. But then I saw Gary Yourofsky's speech, and it changed everything for me, because it was then that I realized that what I was doing was not about me. And the most important aspect of what I was doing was that I was abstaining from contributing to the most evil industries on the planet. And I was abstaining from an injustice that I hadn't even considered the enormity of. When I realized that, I felt deeply compelled to do something about it, and I became an activist. But it took me a little while. It took me a little while to find myself as an activist, and I didn't really think of myself as one in the beginning. I just spoke up, and I always spoke up, and I failed so many times, and I lost a lot of friends, and I even broke ties with family members. I was in a relationship at the time. She wasn't vegan, and that was one of the reasons why we couldn't stay together. And it was just it became such a defining moment for me, where everything was centered around this injustice and what I was doing about it. So when I got into activism, I imagined that I would do something on social media, because we run the media now, and we all need to understand that. And I started a YouTube channel, and then I started volunteering with the local animal liberation group. Through all of this, I grew frustrated with the vegan movement. I was frustrated because I could see how organized animal agriculture was and how disorganized the vegan movement was. And I don't say this to take anybody down or bring anybody's spirits down. I say this because I want for us to win this war, and it is a war. There's a war going on against animals, and the only people that are fighting for them is vegans. Not vegetarians, not any other group. There's only vegans fighting for these innocent beings. So if we start to look at this as a war, then we need to treat it as such. Martin Luther King said, "Those who love peace must learn to organize as much as those who love war." The reason for that is because we can't expect... Animal agriculture is so organized that they have government subsidies. That enables them to sell products that are worth 10 times more than what they really are being sold for. They're so organized they've convinced us since birth to consume products that support evil, that go against our values. To support the largest injustice on the planet, it's destroying our planet, and it's leaving us with no future. We supported all of this blindly, and it's only because of the conditioning, and all of that came from the organization of animal agriculture. And it's also just all of these industries that exploit animals. My point is, they are so organized that if we don't act as organized as they do, or even more organized than they are, we can't expect to win this war. When we got out onto the streets to do activism, we were inspired by Earthling's experience. So we got out there and we got masks together and we did some video outreach. While we were doing street activism in that style, we noticed that there was more that we could probably do to make an impact on the streets. So on our third demo, we put together what is known today as the Cube of Truth. Yeah. Thank you so much. And the Cube of Truth has become a worldwide phenomenon, and we're now set up in 130 cities in our first year. The reason why the Cube of Truth took off is because of how organized it is. The Cube of Truth is taken seriously on the streets, and the reason why we do that is because the more that we take activism on the streets seriously, or activism in general seriously, the more people will take us seriously. And that's exactly what we've found. Now, I'm not saying that you have to act like a robot. I'm saying that you have to take this seriously when you operate on the streets. And what you actually find is that the more impact you make as a result of this, the more you will actually enjoy it. Impact feels amazing. Activism feels better than veganism. Effective activism removes all of the hopelessness. If you see it firsthand, the impact that you're making, it removes all of that doubt that we're going to become extinct as a species as a result of our dietary choices. All of that stuff is important for us to take seriously, because we can't just live for today. So myself and my partner Asal, we started Anonymous for the Voiceless, an organization that operates on the streets, and through doing activism we learned that the most important thing with the events was to take them seriously, and we took aesthetics seriously. Why is aesthetics so important? I know many vegans that went vegan because of a documentary. And I don't know many vegans, I do know vegans, but I don't know many vegans that went vegan because of a book. The reason for that is because you could have the same information in a book as you would have in a documentary, and the documentary is going to make way more impact and reach more people. The same information but different aesthetic. Look at Steve Jobs with the Apple products. I mean, there were already phones and computers out in the marketplace. All he did was make them more aesthetic, and people tend to generally gravitate towards those products over and above the other products. So when we're presenting the vegan message to people, aesthetics is super important. As you know, vegans aren't taken seriously for the most part. So that's why I say we do need to take this seriously, and then people will take us seriously as a result. So many people approach us on the streets and they say, I'm not going to go vegan, but I really respect what you're doing. The fact that you're standing here and presenting this information in this way, it was just so cool that I had to stop. That image that we leave with people is important, you know, it may lead to them becoming a vegan activist one day. So when you become vegan and you do your research, you realize the enormity of this injustice. You realize how vile and disgusting it all is, and that everybody you know is supporting it. And whenever you speak up, most of the time, you might find that people are resistant and they just don't want anything to do with it, you know. So what do we do about this? Most vegans I know have become complacent, burnt out, and they've put their social discomfort over and above speaking up. And while I understand the burnout, believe me, I understand it. We do demos every week in Melbourne. We haven't cancelled a single demo in Melbourne City where we started Anonymous for the Voiceless. And we see the images on the screen. Thank you. These images have desensitized me to a level. But it's important that we continue to speak up no matter how many times we fail. You could talk about veganism to 3 or 4 different people, and you're going to get a different response each time. They might all be resistant, but it might be a bit of a different response each time. When I'm speaking to people about veganism, I find what I'm really trying to do is find out how self-entitled they are. From there I can find how deep I can plant the seed. What's kept me sane throughout this is to not be attached to the seed growing. To just do your job, which is to plant the seed as best as you can. So we need to keep speaking up no matter how many times we fail. I can't tell you how many times I see vegan activists saying I'm taking a break, and it breaks my heart that some of these vegans never come back. They just never come back to doing vegan activism. They do YouTube videos on their channel and then they just stop all of a sudden and they never post anything ever again. Burnout is real. Burnout is so real. The only way I find to overcome burnout is to take veganism seriously and to act accordingly, but to also enjoy it. With activism, it has to be treated in a way that's professional, but it also has to be enjoyable, otherwise you won't want to keep doing it. So it's important to find your groove. You don't necessarily have to do what we're doing out on the streets. You don't have to do street activism. You don't have to necessarily be a YouTube activist. You could be an artist, you could be a truck driver, you could play lawn bowls. But you have to speak up. And you need to learn how to speak up in a way that's effective and enjoyable. And I find that the more impact you make, the more enjoyable it is. So, if any of you have seen the Cube of Truth demonstrations, we have 2 parts to the demonstrations. We have the Cube showing the footage to the public in a non-confrontational way. And then we have the outreach, that's the other element. The outreach is set up in a way where we wait for the bystanders to come to us. We're pre-qualifying the public. We don't want to waste time on people who are ignorant and love their ignorance, and they're unreachable as a result. And there's a lot of those people out there. But there's also a lot of people that appreciate information and they want to know more. So it's those who stop and they watch for 30 seconds to a minute that we engage with. As an organization, we are an abolitionist vegan group. Why is abolitionist so important? Because vegetarianism has been killing the vegan movement. When we talk to vegetarians on the street, sometimes they're the hardest people to get through to. And the reason I think this is because maybe they were promoted vegetarian as a temporary stepping stone to veganism. And when we do that, we promote the idea that it's morally okay in some way. In life, humans are always looking for hacks, shortcuts, right? It becomes morally a hack to become a vegetarian for some people, or a reducitarian or a flexitarian. And what that does is it creates a comfort zone. And people love comfort zones. They exist in the comfort zone and they become so complacent. And in fact, what's worse is they become self-entitled, that they don't need to do anything else above what they're doing. So it makes them it's almost impossible to get through to those people and to convince them to become vegan. We promote a clear vegan message on our outreach. And if people want to do less than veganism after you've promoted a clear vegan message, they will. But it shouldn't be because a vegan has encouraged them to do less, even temporarily, as a stepping stone to becoming vegan. The morally correct thing to do is to promote veganism. Anything less than that is morally unsound. In fact, being vegan isn't enough. We need to be vegan activists. And that's the reality. But of course, when you're talking to someone who is a carnist by default, telling them to become a vegan activist is a bit of a far stretch for them. Vegan is enough, you know. But we do need to promote veganism as the baseline. That is the absolute starting point for people. And then we should promote how easy it is to be vegan and tell them that all of these things that they think are going to get in the way of them becoming vegan are all just ideas in their heads that they're latching onto. And we need to show people how delicious, how affordable, and how easy it is, and how beneficial it is for their health and for the environment. And we need to sell veganism to people. One of the benefits I have a sales background. That's what I was doing for a paycheck growing up. And in sales, we would always learn the psychology of our customers so that we could learn how to sell better. But the difference between that and what I'm doing now is back then it was a commission-based approach. I was trying to churn people over to sign on the dotted line so I could make some commission. Now what I'm doing is I'm using tactics. I'm using sales psychology in order to get people to become vegan, which I don't get any benefit out of. I don't get any monetary value out of. But the value I get from that is that I know that I'm making a difference in the world, and the feeling is you couldn't pay me enough money to stop being an activist. So now it's a value-based sales approach that I use, and we try to use some of the sales psychology that I've used in what we do with outreach. Another good thing is to use something called the Socrates method, and that's something that Earthling Ed and other great activists talk about. And that's, to simplify, it's asking questions instead of lecturing people. Lecturing is fantastic if somebody is open-minded and willing to listen, but you have to gauge whether someone's in that position where they want to listen to you and they want the information, so they'll listen. But for the most part, that's not going to work. Most people are just going to shut off. It's better to ask questions, and I'll give you an example. Instead of saying animal cruelty is wrong, ask them if they think animal cruelty is wrong. You're going to get the same answer. Most people will say yes. And from there, you can guide the conversation in the direction of veganism. The Socrates method is really, really good in that sense. And what we do also with Anonymous with Voices is we tally our results. So when we sincerely sense that somebody is going to take the issue seriously, then we keep a tally and at the end of our demonstrations, we go over how many people we impacted, those who will take the issue seriously and follow up. Of course, there's no way that you will know 100% if someone is going to go vegan once you've had a conversation with them, unless you interrogate them and you follow up and you do some private investigations. You know, you could add them on Facebook and see if their posts give away any ideas or any clues, but overall, there's no real way of knowing. Even if you get their email address and follow up, they could write you an email and say, yes, I've gone vegan, just to shut you up and for them to be left alone. So there's no real way of knowing, but the way that we gauge it is we will go off our sincere impression that they're going to go and follow up on the information. I'm going to leave this speech on this last point. The reason why being vegan and being an activist is so important is because veganism is about justice, and there is no greater injustice on the planet. And this, I don't say this to belittle any of the other injustices on the planet, but this is the most pressing issue of our time. Veganism is promoted as a movement of compassion a lot, and I just have to say that I disagree. Veganism for me was never about compassion. It was about wanting a world of justice for all. The reason I say that is because if I don't kill a human today, that doesn't make me compassionate by default. I know many vegans that are not compassionate. If I walk down the street today and I don't pick up a stick and I don't gouge it into a cat's eyeball, that doesn't make me compassionate. When you learn about what you're doing as a non-vegan, when you support animal products, you learn that you're the bully in this and that doesn't go against your values. So you decide to become vegan, which is just the right thing to do. Thank you. So that's just the right thing to do. You realize that you were the bully and you don't want to contribute to that anymore, so you remove yourself from that mentality of viewing animals as products, as property, as inferior to the human species. And then what it does, it leads you to ask yourself what you're going to do about it. When I was in school and I saw kids being bullied, I'd always stick up for the kid being bullied because I hated it. I am someone who hates injustice. So when I would see that, I would jump in. That's how I feel about veganism. When I see what happens with animals, I want to stick up for them. When I saw this as a non-vegan, I realized I was the one that was contributing to all of this, and then I removed myself from it. But that doesn't make me a compassionate person by default. And then I decided to speak up and help others to stop being bullies. So what we need to do is treat this like a justice movement, and like I said, the more that we take this as a war against animals, and the more that we perceive it as such, we will operate differently as a movement. We'll be more organized, we'll be more structured, and we will by default force people to take us seriously and this issue seriously. Because again, we're the only ones speaking up, and we need to keep speaking up. Thank you.